I never thought I would tell this story publicly. For years I kept it hidden, not out of shame but out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing everything I once called home. My name is Layla, and this is not just a story. This is a testimony, a real journey. One that began deep within the structure of a devout religious upbringing and led me into an encounter that changed my life forever. I'm not here to argue, to convince, or to debate. I'm here to speak from my heart to anyone who has ever asked the question, is there something more? Because the answer is yes, and this is how I found it. Growing up, I lived inside a world where everything was defined for me before I could even ask a question. Faith was not just something we practiced, it was who we were. It dictated our prayers, our clothing, our choices, our friendships, and even our thoughts. There was no separation between belief and identity. Every morning began with devotion. Every day was filled with structure. And every evening closed with rituals repeated so many times, they were burned into my memory. There was no room for questions. To question was to rebel, and to rebel was to dishonor everything we were raised to protect. I remember memorizing prayers before I knew what the words meant. I repeated them with perfect rhythm and pronunciation, but my heart felt distant. I watched others cry during prayer, speak of deep encounters with God, and speak in reverent tones, but I felt nothing. I wanted to feel something, anything, but my silence became my disguise. I quickly learned what was expected of me, and I became very good at performing it. The right words, the right behavior, the right image. I became so good at wearing the mask that even I started to forget it was a mask. On the outside, our family looked perfect, respected, structured, faithful. But behind closed doors, I lived with a quiet ache. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't resentment. It was emptiness, a longing for something real. I didn't want to abandon my beliefs. I wanted them to come alive. I longed for a connection that went beyond discipline and duty. Something personal, something alive, something that answered the questions I didn't dare speak aloud. Even as a child, I remember lying in bed at night staring at the ceiling and wondering, is this all there is? Is this what knowing God is supposed to feel like? But I never spoke those words. I knew better. I buried them deep inside and smiled during ceremonies. I was praised for being devoted. I knew the scriptures. I recited the rituals. I followed every rule. But when I was alone, the silence became unbearable. Eventually, the silence turned into acting. I wasn't just hiding, I was performing. I became who everyone wanted me to be. My parents were proud. My teachers praised me. My community admired me. But inside, I was unraveling. I started to ask myself, if this is what it means to be faithful, why do I feel so far away from God? Why do I feel invisible? Why does it seem like everyone else has something I don't? I convinced myself that faith was a duty, not a feeling. That love for God was something earned, not received. So I tried harder. I prayed more. I fasted longer. I served more diligently. I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I did everything perfectly, the emptiness would leave. But it never did. The more I tried, the more hollow I felt, and I began to wonder if something was broken inside me. Still, I kept going, because that's what I was taught to do. Obedience would lead to revelation. Obedience would lead to God. That's what I believed, and I was terrified that if I ever stopped, everything around me would collapse. So I stayed silent. I stayed loyal. I stayed hidden. But deep within me, a quiet question started to whisper. What if there's more? The moment that changed everything didn't begin with thunder. It began with stillness. I was scrolling through my phone late one night, trying to distract myself from the noise in my head. I wasn't looking for anything, just trying to escape for a moment. That's when it happened. A video appeared. I almost skipped it, but something in the title caught my attention. It mentioned Jesus, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I clicked. My heart raced. I felt like I was doing something wrong, but I couldn't look away. The voice in the video was gentle but direct. He spoke about Jesus not as a historical figure, not as a prophet, but as someone who knew him intimately, as someone who loved him personally. That word, love, hit me in a way nothing else had. I had heard about God's expectations, his commands, his judgment, but never love like this. Unconditional, sacrificial, present. I didn't know whether to be offended or overwhelmed, but I watched the video until the end, holding my breath. When it finished, I sat in the dark, frozen. Tears streamed down my face and I didn't know why. I wasn't sad. I wasn't scared. I was awakened. Something inside me had shifted. I wanted to know more. I needed to know more. Was it true? Could it be true? Could this Jesus really be what I had been searching for all along? The curiosity was no longer intellectual. It was soul deep, and it was relentless. That night I couldn't sleep. Questions raced through my mind. I opened my laptop and searched for more videos, more testimonies, more stories. I found people who had grown up like me, devout, committed, loyal to the same tradition. But something had drawn them away. Not hate, not anger, hunger. They weren't bitter, they were free. And I wanted that freedom too. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't unsee what I had seen. During the day, I played my role like always. But at night, I became a seeker. I read scripture in secret. I downloaded apps and deleted them before anyone could see. I erased my browser history every morning. I wore my disguise in public and removed it in the dark. It was exhausting, but I didn't care, because something real had been ignited. I was no longer curious. I was desperate. Then one night in the quiet of my room, I prayed a prayer that wasn't rehearsed. That wasn't in Arabic. That wasn't written in a book. It was mine. Simple. Raw. Jesus, if you're real, show me. I didn't know what would happen, but in that silence something settled over me. Not fear, not thunder. Peace. A peace I had never felt before. Gentle, steady, familiar. I broke down crying, not out of fear, but out of recognition. My soul had touched something true. That moment changed everything. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it was powerful. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, known, not by a religion, not by a system, by a person. And that person was Jesus. I didn't know the theology. I didn't understand the doctrine, but I knew I had just met someone real, someone alive, someone who listened to my whisper and answered it with peace. And from that moment forward, I could never go back to pretending. From then on, I was living two lives, the one everyone saw and the one only I knew about. I still wore the clothes, still recited the prayers, still played the part. But at night, I talked to Jesus like a friend. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I was being heard. My prayers weren't perfect, they weren't memorized, but they were real. And every time I spoke, I felt him near. I couldn't explain it, but I couldn't deny it either. I began reading the Bible piece by piece, not with an agenda, just curiosity. I started in the Gospels. I read about a man who sat with the broken, loved the outcasts, forgave the sinners, and welcomed the doubters. It didn't feel like ancient history. It felt like someone describing my heart. Every chapter felt like a mirror, every verse a whisper. I wasn't just reading words, I was being read. And every time I closed the book, I felt known. It was beautiful and terrifying. I was falling in love with someone I wasn't supposed to know. I felt like I was betraying my family, my culture, my name. But I couldn't stop, because for the first time, I wasn't trying to earn love. I was receiving it, freely. And that scared me more than anything. I had built my whole life on performance, and suddenly, I was being told that I didn't have to perform to be accepted. The guilt was heavy. Some nights, I lay in bed trembling. What if I was wrong? What if I was deceived? But even in my fear, I couldn't deny the presence I had encountered. I had never felt this peace during years of devotion. Not once. And now, just by whispering a name, I was being comforted. Was that wrong? Was that dangerous? Or was that the truth breaking through? Then, everything fell apart. One morning, my brother walked into my room without knocking. My phone was on the bed. A video paused. The name Jesus bright on the screen. Our eyes locked. He said nothing, just stared, then turned and walked out. My heart sank. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew nothing would be the same again. By that evening, I was locked in my room. My phone was gone. My windows were shut. My world collapsed. My parents wouldn't speak to me. My siblings wouldn't look at me. I became a prisoner in my own home. The silence was louder than screams. I knew they had found out. I knew they were afraid. And I knew their fear would turn into control. But I never expected what came next. They brought in a religious leader to restore me. He quoted verses. He warned me of hell. He said I had been deceived by the enemy, that my soul was in danger. I nodded. I listened, but my heart was elsewhere. I wasn't rebelling. I was surviving. And deep down, I clung to the one I had come to know, the one who whispered peace when everyone else spoke fear. Jesus hadn't abandoned me. Not then. Not ever. One night I was pulled from my sleep by hands that were too familiar. Two men, relatives, dragged me from my room. I screamed, but my voice cracked. They bound my hands, blindfolded my eyes, and pushed me into a vehicle. My mother cried in the distance, but she didn't stop them. I felt like I was being erased, taken away for good. My heart pounded, but I didn't pray to escape. I prayed for strength. I knew Jesus was listening. They said I had to be purified, that I had invited a demon, that they would cleanse me. But it wasn't deliverance. It was punishment. They poured cold water over me, screamed in languages I barely understood. They hit me when I resisted. I lost all sense of control. But one word never left my lips, even if only in my mind. Jesus. Not as a rescue call, as an anchor. That name became my lifeline. In the chaos, I clung to it. In the violence, I held on. Not because I thought he would stop them, but because I knew he was with me, in the fire, in the storm, not watching from a distance, but present, inside, steady, loving. And in that moment, I understood something I had only read. He is close to the brokenhearted. I was broken, and he was close. They eventually stopped, exhausted, furious. They thought they had defeated me, that I had surrendered, but I hadn't. I had survived, and to me, survival was victory. They returned me to my room, battered and bruised, but something inside me was stronger than ever. Not because I was brave, but because he was present. They could strip away everything, but not him. After days of silence and pain, I escaped. I won't share how. It's still not safe. But I found shelter. A woman I had never met took me in. No questions, just food, a blanket, safety, and freedom. For the first time, I prayed out loud, read without hiding, slept without fear. I wept, not from sorrow, but from overwhelming gratitude. Jesus had rescued me, not just spiritually, physically. I wasn't healed overnight. The trauma didn't vanish, but I was free. I was alive, and I was held. I could breathe again, laugh again, hope again. Everything I had lost, I began to reclaim, piece by piece, scar by scar. And through it all, he was near. The same peace I had felt in secret now covered me like armor. And I knew I could never go back. I didn't understand everything. I still had questions. But I had one truth that outweighed every doubt. I was loved, unconditionally, completely, eternally. And that was enough. That was more than enough to begin again. Because this wasn't just the end of my old life. It was the beginning of something new, something holy, something real. Healing was not linear. It didn't come all at once. It came in waves, some gentle, some violent. There were nights I woke up in cold sweats, reliving the trauma. There were days I wanted to pick up the phone and call my mother, just to hear her voice. But I couldn't. The silence from my family was deafening. I had been cut off, forgotten, rejected. But in that rejection, I found something deeper. Jesus had not only met me in my pain, he stayed with me in it. He didn't erase my past. He redeemed it. He gave meaning to the wounds I carried. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I found a small community of believers, people who, like me, had walked away from everything they knew to follow something they couldn't deny. We came from different backgrounds, spoke different languages, carried different stories, but we were united by the same grace. We weren't just survivors, we were seekers, worshipers, beloved. I wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to pretend. I could just be. Broken, healing, real. They listened to my story without flinching. They prayed over me. We cried together. We laughed together. And slowly, I began to understand the power of testimony. My pain wasn't just a scar, it was a doorway, a key, a weapon. And I realized that what had tried to destroy me had actually become the reason someone else might find hope. So I started sharing. Not because I had healed completely, but because I knew someone else was still where I had been. And if I could be a light in their darkness even for a second, it was worth it. The first time I shared publicly, my hands were shaking. My voice cracked. I almost backed out. But I remembered the girl I used to be. Alone, confused, desperate. I spoke for her. I spoke for the ones still hiding, the ones still afraid, the ones who are silently whispering prayers, wondering if anyone hears them. I looked straight into the camera and said, "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. There is a God who sees you, just like he saw me." And that message, it changed lives, not because of me, but because of him. More people began reaching out, messaging me, thanking me, asking questions, sharing their own stories. Many of them were still living double lives, terrified of being discovered. Others had never dared to ask the questions I once whispered in secret, but now they were curious. Now they were searching. Now they were awakening. And I knew right then that this story was never just about me. It was always meant to be a bridge, a light, an invitation. I told every person the same thing. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to clean yourself up first. You don't need a perfect history. You just need an honest heart. That's where it starts. That's where he meets you. And when you meet him, truly meet him, everything changes. Not all at once, not always visibly, but deeply, eternally, irrevocably. You don't have to chase him. He's already running toward you. And if you're wondering right now whether this is for you, let me make it clear. It is. You are not watching this by accident. There is a reason your heart is beating a little faster. There is a reason something inside you is stirring. That's not emotion. That's invitation. That's him, whispering, calling, reaching, just like he did for me. And now, it's your turn to whisper back. Just one word. Yes. I used to think courage was loud, bold, dramatic. But I've learned that real courage is quiet. It's steady. It's saying yes when everything inside you is screaming no. It's taking one step forward in the dark, believing that light will meet you there. I didn't feel brave when I left home. I didn't feel brave when I was locked away. I didn't feel brave when I cried alone on the floor. But now I see that was courage. Not because I was fearless, but because I moved forward in spite of the fear. There were moments when I wanted to go back. Not because I doubted Jesus, but because I missed my family, missed my culture, missed the comfort of familiarity. I wanted to belong again. I wanted to be hugged by my mother, teased by my brothers, celebrated by my community. And yet I knew that going back would mean burying the truth, silencing the voice that had brought me to life. I couldn't do it. I couldn't unknow what I now knew. So I stayed. I stayed in the unknown. I stayed in the discomfort. I stayed in the in-between. And in that space, I found him again. Not in the noise, in the stillness, in the ache, in the longing. He was there, speaking peace over my grief, speaking identity over my shame, speaking purpose over my past. He was not ashamed of me. He was proud to call me his. And that truth was worth more than anything I had lost. I still have questions. I still have wounds. But I don't walk alone anymore. Every scar has become a story. Every tear has watered something new in me. I have been transformed, not by religion, not by rules, but by relationship. A relationship with the one who found me when I was lost, who loved me when I hated myself, who stayed when everyone else walked away. That kind of love rewires everything. And it's not just for me, it's for you too. If you feel broken, confused, alone, I see you. I know you, because I was you. And I want you to hear me clearly. There is hope. There is healing. There is redemption. You don't have to carry the weight of your pain forever. You don't have to earn your worth. You already have it. You were created with intention, seen, known, loved. You were never meant to just survive. You were meant to live, fully, freely, abundantly. And that life is not found in performance. It's found in surrender, in that quiet moment where you stop trying to hold everything together and just say, Jesus, I need you. That's where it begins. That's where everything shifts, not because you're perfect, but because he is, and he has never stopped pursuing your heart. So what are you waiting for? What's holding you back? Fear, shame, doubt? He's not afraid of any of that. He's not asking you to be ready. He's just asking you to be willing to come, willing to ask, willing to whisper the question that changed my life forever. Jesus, if you're real, show me. I promise you, he will. I've come to understand that the most powerful stories aren't the ones told from stages, but the ones whispered from scars. This is my story. A story of searching, breaking, and being found. A story of fear and freedom. Of silence and a voice that finally spoke louder than all the lies I had believed. I didn't find religion. I found Jesus. Not an idea, not a rule. A person, a savior who walked into my fire and brought me out of it alive. If you've listened to this entire story and something inside you is stirring, don't ignore that. That pull you feel, that's him. You don't need perfect words. You don't need a clean past. You just need a willing heart. Say it with honesty. Jesus, if you're real, show me. I promise you, he will meet you right where you are. Not with condemnation, but with compassion. Not with shame, but with love. The same love that rewrote my life can rewrite yours. So here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe to this channel, not just to follow content, but to follow Jesus. This is more than a platform. It's a doorway, a space where seekers become believers, where the hurting find hope. If you're ready to take your next step, stay close. Let's walk this path together. You were not made to walk alone. Leave a comment below, share your story, ask your questions, say the prayer out loud. This isn't a one-way conversation. This is community. I read every message. I pray over every name. Because this isn't about building a following. It's about building faith. And your voice matters here. You matter here. Send this video to someone who's searching. You never know. The simple act of sharing could change someone's eternity. Just like one video changed mine. Let's be the light in someone else's darkness. Let's speak what others are afraid to say. Let's create space for honesty, for transformation, and for freedom. I know the cost of this journey. I know what it feels like to lose everything familiar. But I also know the gift of gaining something eternal. And if you're standing at that crossroads, don't choose fear. Choose truth. Choose freedom. Choose Jesus. He doesn't just change your path. He gives you a new name, a new heart, a new life. Thank you for being here, for listening, for opening your heart. Whether you're right at the beginning or halfway through the fire, I see you. I believe in the one who's walking with you. You are not alone. And this isn't the end. It's the beginning. So until next time, stay close, stay honest, and keep seeking. Because I believe with all my heart, the best is still ahead. I'll be here, waiting to hear your story. Let's keep walking. One prayer, one step, one yes at a time.